My name is Gemma Waddington. I work for Hyde Housing and I am a decant officer. I have dyslexia and dyspraxia. This wasn't diagnosed until later on in my 20s when I went to university. Throughout my whole school career, I struggled up until university. Teachers used to say to me, I've never amounted to much, I was lazy, I couldn't be bothered, I was capable, but I just was lazy and didn't want to learn, which actually really wasn't the case. It was the fact that I did have neurodiversity, I had dyslexia and dyspraxia, and nobody had ever picked it up or diagnosed it. In secondary school, it got briefly hinted that I could be dyslexic, and then it was left. College, I did their form of dyslexia assessment, and I got the lowest mark twice that they had ever seen, and that was more because it was to do with sequencing patterns, and that isn't good for somebody with dyspraxia. So with all the feedback that was said to me throughout school, I never ever felt that I was capable enough to go to university. And then I got into my 20s and I decided to go. That's where I had my assessment by an education psychologist, and that's where I got diagnosed with dyslexia and dyspraxia. My dyslexia and my dyspraxia has various different impacts on my day-to-day life and also on my working life as well. So with my dyspraxia, I'm unable to drive. I've tried to learn 5 or 6 times, but it's the coordination, it's the spatial awareness, and obviously having spatial awareness is obviously quite a big part of being able to drive. Changing lanes, I could never ever gauge the distance, so I do rely a lot on walking on foot or public transport. I do not hold my pen like everybody else. I hold my pen differently, so my handwriting can look really messy. That's why I prefer typing. I much prefer to type. I also do not hold my knife and fork like other people either, which might not sound a huge thing, but I can quite often end up with food down myself because the coordination also with cutting, which in terms of a working life, if you're having lunch with work colleagues and you end up not being able to cut things, you end up spilling stuff down yourself, it can be quite awkward or a little bit embarrassing. I also have sensory issues, which is quite common with dyslexia and dyspraxia. Mine happens to be lights. So really bright lights affect me. I can't really describe it, but it'll give me an absolute blinding headache and I can't concentrate. So working at home a lot more for me has been amazing because I just have the very bare minimum lights on. I can't read off of a white background, so I need to have blue paper. How it affects me in my working life, I like to have the notes for meetings beforehand. Any form of email communication, I like to be concise and bullet pointed. I really must point out that everybody is different. Not one person with neurodiversity is the same. So what works for me might not work for any of my colleagues. I started the first workplace employee resource group, Don't Diss My Ability, and this year we are focusing on neurodiversity. So there's quite a few of us on the group now with varying different disabilities, but there are a lot of us with neurodiversity in the group. We really are working hard to raise awareness. So far we have done a campaign on dyscalculia, which is dyslexic with numbers, ADHD. We've done a lot about dyslexia and dyspraxia, and also we're going to be looking at autism and Asperger's. We've got an outside ambassador who is a lovely lad called Joseph, who's autistic, and he has met with staff twice now from across the business, and he will be coming back to speak to staff again. He has been absolutely invaluable. I mean, the information he's given us, not just about how we can support staff, but how we can support residents as well. Just simple things like the sound of the fire alarms. Joseph doesn't like the sound of the fire alarms, and he's in a supported scheme. So how as a business, how as a housing association, do we manage that? So for people with autism, if there needs to be fire alarm testing in the block, how do we manage that to make it more easier for them? I think educating and awareness is really is the top thing. Educating your employees. I really would recommend having an employee resource group as well. So at Hyde, you have got 4 employee resource groups, and we all work really closely together as well. We all really support each other. So you've got Women's Aspire, you've got the Pride group, which is for LGBTQ+. You've got Embrace, which is for our Black, Asian and ethnic minority staff, and then you've got the group I'm chair of, Don't Diss My Ability. And the work that, I'm passionate about all D&I, and I'm an ally to all of the groups, but the work that all of the groups are doing is just incredible. So I'd recommend any housing association having these employee resource groups. We're actually going to be talking to the residents about all the diversity work that we've been doing. It's also, if you know a resident has a disability, it's probably asking how they need support, because like I said earlier, every person is different. How I am with my dyslexia and my dyspraxia, somebody else could be completely different. So if you know they have, it might just be asking, is there any extra support you need? Is there anything you need to do for us? I'll give you a great example. I phoned a company the other day, and they actually did ask me. I've only ever been asked twice by a company I've spoken to, and they said, have you got any disabilities? And I said, how can we support you? And that's the business I then chose to go with. And I said, I really need all communication on blue paper. And they were like, yeah, brilliant, no problem at all. And that made me feel really valued, and also made me want to choose them as well. But it's really just listening, and I definitely would, and I keep saying it, get an employer resource group, because then you've got people from all sorts of different parts of your business who deal with residents in different ways, and they should then be able to advise and guide on the best ways that they think that they can support them.